Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami. Thank you so much for joining us, Derek.
Oh, thank you, and aloha to everybody.
We know that Kauai is doing well. Tell us what's going on over there.
We're doing well. We're looking at early May to start loosening up again. We did an initial loosen up of some of our restrictions by allowing small construction projects to start up work again. We allowed landscapers out. You know, we're sort of slow as far as opening things up, but May 3rd would be that date where we look at 2 incubation periods from our community transmission case, which we only have one that we know of, where we feel we can loosen up more in line with the governor's definition of essential versus non-essential. So, you know, we're really close. The people are really participating, and I got to attribute it to our team and to this community for having the relatively low numbers and stable numbers as well.
Yeah, early on, you really imposed these strict restrictions on movement of people. And, you know, it was criticized at first that maybe it was a little too much, but you knew your community.
Yeah, we knew our community and we knew what was happening around the world. You know, that's the one thing that we had as an advantage, is we could kind of see things unfold in front of us. And when you start hearing various governments saying we moved too slow, you know, we wish we would have moved quicker, we wish we would have tied it up a little tighter. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because, you know, these countries and states that have gone through it are telling you. And so, you know, when you're dealing with this type of situation, we're all born with natural instincts so that we can survive. And over time, you know, perhaps we don't use those instincts, so they lay dormant. But, you know, on Kauai, because we've had disasters, that gut instinct is very much alive. And so as much as we rely on science, because there's so much information we don't know, we move quickly on what our instincts are telling our heart to do. And I think that was the biggest difference, is we just moved quickly.
Well, there's still a lot of criticism on visitors, of course, coming to our islands, and they're able to slip through the cracks. We're seeing violators. What are you seeing on the ground over there? Are you seeing tourists really adhere to these quarantines they're supposed to be under?
You know, for the most part, we are, because we have a strong KPD presence out there that actually going and doing visits to the locations. And, you know, we have a whole bunch of community members that are our eyes and ears on the streets as well. And we respond to those reports that are coming out. But we've had even residents message me and reach out to say that they had to go to Oahu for, you know, a medical procedure or for a family emergency. And when they came back, they were quarantined as mandated, and they actually had a police officer come by. And so they wrote me to say, you know, thank you. We appreciate that, you know, our police department is taking it seriously, that our local government is taking it seriously. There's so much more improvements that need to be made, though. I think the disconnect could be from, say, like when you have a passenger coming from Oahu to Kauai, they have to ensure at that point that that person has the proof of accommodation before they even get on that plane. Because by the time they land on Kauai, it now becomes our problem to send them back, have them find an accommodation, or have them get arrested and sit overnight in a cell block. But those are the 3 options. And we take it seriously because, you know, we're a small island, and we have limited resources, and we're extremely protective of our people. You know, it's just in our nature.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing to be better safe than sorry in that case. You know, I talked to General Kenneth Hara earlier about, you know, what more can be done to get them at the airport, because sometimes a lot of these tourists don't give accurate information on their forms, right? They just try to sneak by. I talked to Senator Kalani English about these 2 tourists that were able to island hop. They even made it to Kauai, right? And then Lanai of all places.
Yeah.
What's happening here? What are the gaps there?
You know, we're identifying the gaps, and I think what I just spoke of earlier is where the gap is. It's making sure that somebody is appropriately vetting these forms out to make sure the information is correct and that they're being truthful. But these folks that are traveling during a pandemic are just, I mean, it's baffling. You know, like your parents tell you there's a time and place for everything. This is not the right time or place for any type of travel unless it's absolutely necessary. So these folks that are taking a risk and putting our people at risk, um, I just don't understand it.
Well, some people say it's because of the cheap flights, right? Like you're never going to come to Hawaii in normal circumstances with how expensive it can be. So some of these people are just lured by these low fares.
Yeah, and so this is where government has to start thinking outside of the box, which is what we did to make Kauai unappealing. Because when we were pushing to have non-essential travel halted, and I gotta clarify, you know, the governor doesn't say it as much as he should, but he reached out to the FAA. When we sat down with him to tell him what's the deal, he said, hey, he reached out to the FAA and they said they will not stop non-essential travel. They've never done it in the history. They won't do it now. It's just something they're not going to do. So I know the governor takes a lot of hits for that. But when he spoke to us, he made it clear that this is the reality. So when we on Kauai were thinking, okay, what can we do? We said, well, let's make Kauai unappealing and let's protect people. We threw up a curfew. We imposed a beach park user fee. We limited the amount of permits that are out there to 100. So, you know, it's not the best place for visitors to take a look at what we put up and say, hey, Kauai is a great place, because it's really not a great place to come.
It's really up to mayors like yourself doing it on the ground. I just wanted to remind our viewers that we're talking to Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami, and I'm seeing some people just post saying how you're doing a good job. Thank you for all you're doing. If you have any questions, you can always just put it on our Facebook feed, and he can answer them to the best of his ability. But I'm asking my own questions for my own show, so I wanted to find out about, you know, testing. We're not at the point of asymptomatic testing, but as we reopen the economy, Mayor, it's like what can we do to ramp up testing of all people, not just those that are showing symptoms?
Yeah, so I think that's a question of supply and demand as to whether we have the capacity to get enough test kits. Do we have the lab capacity to run those tests quickly and get a quick turnaround time? For now, I think what the people of Kauai should know at least is, you know, there was a lot of talk about testing early on. And, you know, this has evolved so quickly that, yes, at the very beginning, testing was very limited. Statewide, you know, the state lab only had a capacity to run 250 to perhaps 500 at a max capacity a week. So that's for every island, 500 up to 500 a week. The amount of tests that each island had was a handful. So the strict requirements to actually get tested were a lot different at the beginning than they are now. Right now, Wilcox Hospital is conducting 7-day-a-week drive-through testing. The requirements have loosened up. You still need a physician's order. You know, just because you want to get a test doesn't mean you're going to get a test, because these are commodities that are still very limited. So we can't afford to blow our resources right out the gate. So there's still requirements. KVMH now also has drive-through testing. I talked to Lance Sigawa, who's in charge of KVMH in Mahiloni. He said right now they're doing it 4 hours a day, which means they can ramp up if the need is there. And so as far as Kauai, the testing capability has increased significantly. Of course, in an ideal world, we'd get to a point where we'd be able to test everybody, but we're not there yet. And that's a reality that we're working towards.
I did want to ask you specifically about Nihao. No one talks about Nihao, but you actually have been able to keep no cases there. Obviously, it's isolated. Just let us know what's going on over there.
Well, you know, the Robinsons and the Nihaoans, they know how to survive. And because it's prohibited for outside visitors to set foot on Nihao, They are very safe. Mr. Robinson has my number, my direct line. I have his direct line. He can call me whenever need be, and I can call him whenever I need to call him. We've chatted in the past, and Ni Hao is doing fine, and that's the best way for Ni Hao to be protected, is to make sure that we respect their rules and their ask for privacy. And in this case, they're doing quite well.
Yeah, this is one positive light for sure, all over the islands. Although we are doing a good job of flattening the curve, a lot of people are saying, but there's this concern about a second wave, a potential second wave. Are you concerned about that as we reopen slowly?
Of course, everybody has it on their mind. This virus, because we don't have a vaccine, because we don't have an antiviral medication, because we don't have the capacity to test everyone. We know that we have to slowly and responsibly open up and stage the reopening of the economy. And that always poses a risk. And that's why from the very beginning, I've told our people, this is going to need a lot of self-discipline. And in this situation, discipline equals freedom. The faster we can flatten the curve and get into the clear, the more freedom we can have. And it requires self-governance. People have a hard time breaking bad habits, but if you get into the routine of wearing a mask, and the only way it works is if everybody's wearing a mask, because it keeps your germs to yourself. If everybody gets into good hygiene, don't touch your face. If you're a nail biter, now's the time to break that bad habit. I mean, my managing director, don't tell him I said this. He at the very beginning started rubbing onions all over his hand, because every time he was going to touch his face, he smelled that horrible stench of an onion. He's a Punahou grad, so outside the box. And having a good hand washing program, having that in and of itself is probably your best first line of defense in dealing with any type of virus. Is having good hygiene and social distancing. I can't say enough about how social distancing, although it's hard, it's a little easier to do on the different counties like Kauai, without all the visitors. It is probably a lot easier to do than urban Honolulu.
Yeah, and the other thing, we're talking about opening and the economy. How are your small businesses doing there? There's no visitors. There's nothing to really spur economic, commerce there. So
they're hurting.
What do you do for them? What's the plan?
Yeah, the small businesses are hurting. I mean, every business is probably hurting. Our customer count evaporated with the rapid slowdown of incoming arrivals. So on our end, we have our Office of Economic Development, who's led by Nalani Brune and her team. And they've partnered up with the private sector, with the Chamber of Commerce, Kauai Visitors Bureau, and some of the best and brightest from our private sector and small business community. And they've already formulated their economic recovery teams. One is focused on short-term immediate recovery. So we created a loan program because the unemployment situation at the state level had some, severe problems. That's a systems problem. Nobody anticipated that much people getting unemployed at once, and so they've formulated the short-term immediate recovery teams, and then we have, of course, the long-term strategy that we have to start really looking forward as to how we're going to move forward and not let this happen again. If we put all our eggs in our basket in that visitor industry and this happens, we have nobody to fault but ourselves. But that's going to be a massive shift in the direction that we invest our resources towards science and technology, agriculture, health and wellness, to further find these feasible industries that we can invest in, so that we don't have this sharp economic collapse if the visitor industry should come to a halt like it has.
Yeah, one of your big employers there, Kilohana Plantation, I spoke to Fred Atkins, who really talked about how dire it is. Even though he got one of those SBA PPP loans, it's really kind of how does he stretch that money and then make sure that it's sustainable, even though he's not open right now. So those kinds of stories we hear, how do they go forward? And then when people get unemployment, right, they may get a little bit more than when they were working.
Yes.
And there's that. So there's that as well. I mean, what can you say about all of this? He also said, it's kind of an economic hurricane. And when you guys had Hurricane Iniki and shut down the island, he was saying that, insurance companies were a big help, but now they aren't around. What's going on there?
Well, there in itself lies a frustration. We put our money into purchasing insurance so that we can be insured that we have some sort of safety net. And when these things don't happen, it really puts a crack in the trust that we have in the insurance industry in and of itself. I don't have all the nitty gritty details on the who, what, why, when, and where that this is happening, but I know that it is happening and it's something that needs to be addressed through policy changes. As far as the economy, I would suggest to people to really focus their support on our local mom and pops. I mean, that is the engine, that is the biggest employer when all is combined, and those are the folks that are going to help us. Those are the same businesses that contribute to our pop honor teams, our Little League Baseball. And in situations like this, we got to be able to lean on each other. And, so that would be my suggestion, is to spend wisely. Like my mom would say, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you can save. And people need to be disciplined with their spending as well. And I hear things coming out from the unemployment office that things are improving. A lot of those errors were human errors on the applicant side, and I get it. A lot of it was they put in the wrong employment date. And if somebody were asked me, what date were you employed? And with all this stress going on, that's an easy mistake to make. So now, from what I understand, they actually have a lot more warm bodies in those chairs, working the operation, following up with some of these incomplete applications, or if there's wrong information. And so things should be moving a lot quicker than they were a week ago.
Yeah, slowly but surely is the name of the game there. But Mayor, I wanted to just give you a chance to one last message to people who are watching about how you're doing and what we can all do to do our part, aside from the usual social distancing and the wearing of the masks. What is your message to our viewers?
To not live in fear. That'd be a choice. To try to find happiness. To try and pick people up after they've fallen. To try as much as we can to leave a place or person better than what we found it in. We're all in this together. And, how we respond in times of crisis and disaster is what we're going to be defined as when we come out into the clear. And, I see I see heroes emerging from the unlikeliest of places. And that is, to me, the basis of my inspiration, to hear people that have been laid off, that can't get unemployment, that are frustrated, but they reach out to say, hey, I'm unemployed, I haven't got my check, but I need something to do. Is there any way I can volunteer? People are making masks. People are, we have the private sector making sanitizer, hand sanitizer. And of course, we have our healthcare workers and our first responders, our grocery workers, everybody else that's out there to make sure that we have our needs being met. They're out there for us. And I just want to thank the people of Hawaii and everybody that's watching. This is history going down in front of our eyes. And it's such a trip. I mean, even for me, there are times when it's quiet and, it still almost feels like it's some sort of dream that I'm waiting to wake up on. but I'm extremely honored to be placed in a position to help and protect people. I feel blessed to be the mayor and to be given a chance. I never imagined in my wildest dreams, and my closest friends are still tripping out to this day that I'm here as mayor. But things happen for a reason, and I'm very thankful for it. And we're gonna get through this.
Very good message. Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.